the CCP has a lot of high-level control over the UN. Do you think, like, what is their take on mass migration? Because I know the CCP doesn't want people leaving China.
I heard a lot of things. There's a few different sides to it. So first of all, one of the reasons why the people go that far down on the migrant route, right? Because people ask, okay, like, why don't they just come directly to the United States, right? People are like, well, how do they get visas from China to leave, right? That's actually why they go so far south, is because they have to go to countries that don't require visas. So they'll go into Ecuador, they'll go into Colombia, for example. Then they'll move up, but that's why they go so far south, actually. That, and also just because it's like the cheaper route. The other side of it, though, there's two sides. Briefly, we mentioned the idea of like a fifth column and China using these people. They do that, but I'll talk about that in the main point you mentioned. But this is important to mention as well. The CCP has stuff set up in the United States to control people once they get here. And that's, of course, the United Front Work Department and the Overseas Chinese Affairs Office. The United Front is like the system of governance the CCP has built. The Overseas Chinese Affairs Office is how the CCP documents and registers and tracks all Chinese expats. They even include second and third generation Chinese in their system. Which is why Chinatowns are such unique areas that the CCP tries to control them as if they're provinces of China. And so even if they come here, the cartels, or sorry, the snakeheads, the triads, the Chinese front organizations, they'll still try to control these people. They will absolutely try to control them, and they will absolutely try to keep them within their orbit and then use them without a doubt, because that's how the CCP operates. On the United Nations level, though, what you were asking about, they have different interests. So there's a couple different things. So as you know, the CCP has huge influence over the United Nations. I mentioned that there's a few different agendas at play. With the UN, they're talking about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. They're talking about global equity, which is global governance. But for the CCP, they're actually talking about, they have an agenda called the multipolar world order, right? The multipolar world order led by a China model. Xi Jinping has publicly talked about this. Vladimir Putin in Russia has openly supported the idea of a multipolar world order led by a China model. Alexander Dugin, one of the main advisors to Vladimir Putin, I read his books to see for myself. What he talks about in his books is the creation of a fourth political system, which takes fascism and communism, merges them together into what they call national Bolshevism, and then use that to challenge what they call the liberal democratic world order, and to create, as he says, a multipolar world order. And so for the CCP, for Russia, for Iran, even for the World Economic Forum, they often talk about this, they want what's called a multipolar world order. And what that is this. The current world order, the US-led world order, what they call the Pax Americana, the peace under America. The idea that if a country violates human rights to a certain extent, America might sanction them. That there are certain values that are given, certain inherent human rights given to us by God. That whole idea of what America represents, that's called the Pax Americana. They refer to that as the unipolar world order, the US-led world order, right? One country world order under America. They want to create what they call the multipolar world order, whereby America has been diminished and other countries have what they call shared global governance. So, for example, Alexander Dugin, one of Putin's main advisors, talks about creating different regional powers within the multipolar world order. Vladimir Putin himself has backed the idea that Xi Jinping has of having this, but having the China model of governance being the system adopted across the board. And so for them, to create that, they have to diminish the unipolar world order. And that means tearing down the United States. And so they have to diminish the power of the US and its main supporters, which is Western Europe. And where are all the migrants going? They're going to the US and they're going to Western Europe. And then the other big thing of it, too, is that the CCP is trying to start up wars right now. Remember, Qin Canrong, one of Xi Jinping's main advisors, had advised Xi Jinping that if they want to start a war with the United States, they have to start 4 different wars. They wanted a war with a terrorist organization. I think we have that now. Look at the resurgence of global terrorism being run through the CCP's proxies, working with Iran, right, restarting the flames of global terror. They have the war with Russia. Qin Canrong actually wanted a conflict in Latin America with Brazil, but because Bolsonaro got into power, that derailed the whole thing. Lula de la Silva, right? That was their main guy. And Lula's back in office now, so they want to revive that. And what I was told by individuals off record, I can talk about it, I can't talk about it, who told me it when I was in Panama. They were saying that one of the big agendas with Venezuela, for example, is they want to invade Guyana. That they're increasing the rate of people getting into the systems of mass migration. And they're doing that, according to the individuals I talked to, because they're trying to destabilize Latin America and they're trying to keep America busy, right? They're forcing us to drain our budgets and deal with a crisis because they want to clear the way for them to invade Guyana. And then in Guyana, they just found one of the world's largest oil reserves, which the CCP has, from the get-go, moved into and already gained huge influence over. And so what's going to happen? Well, Lula's back in office in Brazil. Lula's probably going to back, of course, Venezuela as they do that, and you're going to have a regional war. And so that's the CCP's conflicts right there. This is part of the CCP's agenda as well. Not saying that they're the only driving force with it, but they're using it. They're absolutely using it.
Yeah, I remember we recently talked to Gilman Lailarli, who talked about this, that the CCP wants, or is at least very happy that there are these wars that are sort of draining U.S. resources and attention. I think even recently, I think it was Mike McCall who was in Taiwan. He was saying that part of the problem of U.S. being late with deliveries of weapons to Taiwan is because the military-industrial complex can't keep up because it's being drained so much.
Yeah, might I suggest the CCP get us involved in a naval war, so at least they could tie up our naval resources for Taiwan.
Thank you.
There aren't too many countries capable of a naval war. Is actually the issue.
That's true.
Yeah, unless, of course, the CCP tries to invade Korea.
Okay, that's where you're going. Well, before we get to that, I do want to have a question about this idea of this multipolar world order with the Chinese model, China model, or whatever. Is that not just a CCP-led world order? Is it actually multipolar?
It's not just CCP. Mm-hmm. The CCP would try to dominate it. I mean, because we know how the CCP is. The CCP is not into the idea of sharing power. But the way that there's different views of how it would look. If you go to the World Economic Forum and listen to some of their speeches on the multipolar world order, they have this glowing idea of global shared governance and an equitable world order, where they want to have, for example, governments, NGOs, banks, big corporations kind of having equal power. That it's not just elected government having governmental authority, but even big corporations, banks, and non-governmental organizations, with the United Nations kind of playing the overarching role with it. If you go to the UN, they're talking about this as well. Just in terms of, they just believe this is where the world is heading. And for them, that's great because they want to have more power, right? They want to have more authority. They want to have more of a say over local politics. That's what the UN does, right? And then when you get to the CCP, they're talking about a multipolar world order led by a China model because that's their agenda, and they want to have the world adopt the China model. But then if you go to Russia, they're talking about different regions. And so Alexander Dugin, for example, talks about regional powers, that they'll have the Africa power, they'll have the Latin America power, they'll have the United States as just one of the many players on the table, that they want to have Russia control what they call the Eurasian region. of course, not including China. And so, that's what they're talking about is regional blocks of power that have kind of the way of running this whole new order they talk about.